Feminism, if I understand it correctly, started with a noble mission to give women a voice and equal opportunities. That's my basic understanding of feminism. And it'd be interesting to see if you hold to that as well. But somewhere along the way, it was hijacked by radicals with a new agenda, and that agenda, as we see it play out in our culture, is to undermine the roles of men, to push them aside, and even redefine leadership in the home. In some cases, it has gone as far as emasculating men. And if they ever dare try to take the role back or be that man as it's supposed to be, God help them, right? They get canceled, they get called out, they get shamed, and all of those things I've seen happen in our time because I believe that feminism has been overtaken or have been hijacked, like I mentioned before, and has done great harm, is doing great harm and damage, I believe, to relationships. I mean, especially marriages, the role of husbands and dads. It's really doing a 180, and I'm afraid if this continues and is not somehow curbed, or men do not somehow push back against this, not in a way to be dictatorial or any of those, I don't believe men necessarily want to be that way. It's just really the narrative that's been created to keep men in their corner. The question now becomes, what does this mean for your marriage? Why have some husbands, and maybe yours, chosen to step back and leaving wives feeling unsupported and overwhelmed? At least that's what sometimes the experience of some wives are. And they're wondering, could it be the indoctrination that's taking place? Could it be that some wives are being so indoctrinated and they believe this thing, and somehow they come in with this idea that they need to be this independent woman? And again, I have no problem with a woman being independent. Don't get me wrong, because I support that. It's just in the context of what is being played out that I have a problem. Now, if you've felt the tension within your marriage, and or feeling like something is off in the way today's culture views marriage, this video is for you, because it is off. It is off. Now, but before we get into this and dive into what I believe that we need to do differently, let me just say, if this is your first time viewing this channel, I'm Kingsley Grant, a licensed marriage and family therapist, certified relationship coach, and husband of nearly 40 years as of this recording. Actually, 39 plus years as of this recording. And so I think that, I have a little bit to say. I learned a lot along the way when it comes to marriage. And I help wives of entrepreneurial husbands build happier marriages without neglecting their own needs or losing their God-given identity. Now, let me say, if there are anything that you hear and resonates with you, please smash that thumbs up button. And if you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, may I ask you to do so now? I would really appreciate that. With that said, let's dive into the truth. Now, the earlier waves of feminism, as you kind of heard me mentioned earlier, brought what I believe much needed change or attention, giving women the right that they might have been denied in some things, right? Access to certain things that they may have been denied, and workplace opportunities that they also may have been denied. And I believe it was designed to call attention to a faulty system. By a faulty system, I think it was faulty system in that regards. And by the way, Jesus was the first person of significance or importance who made sure women were recognized as special and important in his day. Men, number one, did not publicly interact with women in certain surrounding certain sectors of his time. And he broke the mold. Jesus broke the mold, and he truly elevated the importance and the value of men, of women. He valued them. You would say, in that context, Jesus was the first feminist in that sense of the word, and that's the kind of feminism I subscribe to. This is what I believe the movement that started some years back were focused on. I believe. I think that was the essence of feminism. But over time, the movement took a radical turn. The message shifted from this simplicity or calling attention to the equality of women and giving them an opportunity to be brought into the equation. And their message have shifted from that to superiority. It's almost like this movement, again, I'm saying this very carefully because I don't want to hear me wrong, but we hear boss babes, right? And lady boss. Now, again, I'm not knocking those things, but I believe that somehow there's a subtle message coming through that as well about women being bosses. And again, I keep on saying again because I want to make sure you hear me correctly. I have no problem with women being bosses, running, companies and managers and all those. I have no problem. Actually, I would one day love to see a woman become the president of the United States. I believe that the right woman, that will come, that, and I don't want to get into the politics here, but I believe that will one day happen. But we see women are being put in high places. And so it's not about that. But I think that this whole lady boss and boss babes and I think there's an underlying sometimes message that's coming through. And dare I say that? I know that you probably are thinking, how dare you? Are you trying to put us back into what, where we're coming from? No, 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 no. You've heard me I've qualified that. And if you're thinking that after what I've just said, well, I can't help you. I'm sorry about that. But this message shifted from that to one of superiority, with some even attacking the role of men and husbands. And this has left many men unsure of their place in the home. Some men have stepped back because they're not in this idea of competing. They're not going to have in their home where their wives are trying to be, had two men in the home wearing the same pants. No, as you may have heard, two bulls cannot roll in the same pan. Two men, I mean, a husband is not going to be okay with his wife trying to take his role and somehow, supersede him. No, men wants that respect. I cannot tell you how often working with men or with couples on a whole, when I would hear a husband said, I feel one thing is lacking in our home is I don't get the respect. And what he's simply saying, his wife is taking over, is undermining his leadership, undermining sometimes what he says. And he's not going to have that. He's going to step back or push back. Really. And sometimes wives don't understand. Some wives don't understand that your husband is doing his best to restrain himself. You don't want to see a man truly becoming stepping out and being everything that he doesn't want to become. And I believe many men restrain themselves so they don't become that kind of man, right? They step back, and when they're stepping back, it's not because they don't care, but because they fear being labeled controlling or oppressive. And they're not going to compete, like I said, for that position with their wife. And what it has done is left many wives overwhelmed and feeling like they're carrying the load alone because that man have pulled back, is stepped back. Why would he want to put himself in positions where he feels constantly being disrespected, and undermined? Why would he? I can tell you, I would not. I thank God that my home has not been that way. And I believe that's why we're being married for 39 plus years, because my wife, she made certain that she doesn't compete for that role. She supports, she encourages, and in that manner, it's a mutual thing happens because there's a reciprocity that takes place. Because when that happens, I mean, I'll do everything to make certain that she's recognized as an equal, which she has. And I've counseled in my work as a licensed marriage and family therapist and certified coach. I have counseled wives who tell me, I want my husband to lead, I wanted him to, and I was trying to, but I guess I went about it a way that pushed him away, and he may resent because now he's distancing himself. He's almost like doesn't want anything to do with that. And she would say, I don't know how we got here. Well, maybe he haven't really said to her I mean, directly, but I'm sure he's sending a message to her how they've gotten to the place that they've gotten. The Bible gives us a beautiful picture of marriage as a partnership. And I believe this is where, as one of the things I believe that where those who embrace, right? If a wife or a husband, of course, but speaking to a wife today, dear wife, when you embrace the mind of Christ, that becomes the fastest and most impactful way for you to build a more peaceful, happier, and a longer lasting marriage. I cannot tell you how much I've seen that. Now, you may say, well, does that mean it's a guarantee? No, of course, both persons have to submit themselves to God and to each other and really work hard at this. It's intentional. Ephesians 5, verse 22 says, wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. As the first part of this equation. And then it went on to say, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. That's some serious kind of loving, right? When those two things are happening, it's incredible what can happen in the marriage. I mean, it's about mutual love and respect, not competition or control. That's not what you hear coming from that scripture. But sometimes it tends to be what comes off in the relationship, especially as feminism has, I call it, I did a podcast episode. And by the way, I have a podcast. It's called Build Your Happier Marriage.com/podcast. But you can find that on any platform that you can listen to a podcast on. Build Your Happier Marriage. And you can hear, I call feminism of our day a scourge on a family or on marriages. I did a post on my Facebook, in my Facebook profile about this very thing, and I asked people to kind of respond. And I had one person, they said right up front that feminism has done such great damage to the Black community. I mean, really, I mean, just right away, because they've seen this kind of thing happening and playing out in the Black community. And I'm sure it happens in other communities as well, but this person happened to speak up on that behalf. There's another lady wrote in and she said, this is diabolical. I mean, it's demonic. And she's coming from the standpoint that it's undermining what God has put in place, because God himself have said, call himself Father, Abba, Father. And so he functioned as a male in that respect. And so whenever that is happening, what this person was making the case is that is what they're trying to do, is undo that whole thing and somehow do away with that. Now, when this design that God has put in place is replaced with cultural ideals that pit spouses against each other, marriages suffer, family suffers, wives feel unsupported, and husbands simply disengage. The family structure begins to crumble. We see it over and over and over again. Why divorce is so high. And this is not the only reason, but I believe it's one of the reasons that are happening. This constant cultural, indoctrination. And what happened is a removal from what God intended. And so it's undermining that. So when a wife gets married and she's been indoctrinated by feminism, she comes in with certain expectations and want to behave certain ways because she believes that's how it should be. No, no, it's not that way. It is, I believe that God has outlined, and he should know, he's the one who instituted marriage in the first place. He's outlined what works best. And God mentioned that, we just read it in Ephesians 5. So here's the good news. Whatever is happening, it doesn't have to stay this way. When you and your husband rediscover your unique roles that God has designed and work together, it creates harmony and strength in your marriage. Just recently, my wife and I were Normally on Sunday afternoons, we go to church in the mornings, come home and just kind of chill out. We cook and so on and do laundry most times on Sunday afternoons. So what happens is she had gone out in the early afternoon, came back, and she went to the kitchen to start cooking. And so the laundry, we know it had to be done. So she started the laundry, and then I took it over. I put it in the dryer and get all that dried, and then I took it into the house and folded. I folded while she was cooking. Right. Sometimes it's a reverse that happens. But this is what it looks like when we are begin to recognize each other's roles. And at times, once we've identified our roles, it doesn't mean we can't cross over at times, right? There's not any one role that means I do this and you do that, and the twain shall never meet. There are times when you would have to then step up or step back. And so in this case, and I remember I was stripping off, my wife and I was stripping the bed off the sheet and to all get it all washed. And, you know, um, I was going to put the wash in, the second load of wash. And she said, okay, I'll stay and finish stripping the bed. You just go ahead and put that clothes in the wash. And what it is a teamwork. And we were able to get all the wash done, all the cooking done in time. We all sat down and ate afterwards. So it's really what it should look like. But it's not this rigidity, but it's not like it's also the message that feminism does send and somehow make this beautiful thing, I believe, called marriage as God intended to somehow no longer become to function as smoothly. Now you might be thinking, isn't this going back to outdated roles? Isn't that what you're trying to say? Not at all. Not at all. It's about rediscovering the beauty of the partnership, the marriage. Feminism's original goals, as I mentioned before, I believe, and again, I could be wrong, but I believe the original goal was this thing I mentioned up front, the recognition, the equality, the opportunity, the respect, the value, the dignity, and all of those things of a woman aligned with God's design when understood correctly. So this isn't about diminishing women or excusing unhealthy behavior in men. It's about creating a space where both your husband and you can thrive in your God-given roles and not allow this, what I believe, demonic messaging to somehow destroy your marriage. I can tell you about early in my marriage, I didn't fully understand the importance of my role as a husband. I understood some. I wanted to provide and protect, but I didn't always lead well. And it wasn't because of the message of feminism for me. It was the business of life and what I made it. So I take full responsibility for that. My lack of communication in that regards as well. And my wife and I had to learn how to balance our strengths, right? Hers and mine in a way that honored God's design. And I believe that's one of the things that has gone into the longevity of our marriage. I've also seen this struggle in couples, like I mentioned earlier, about in my work as a therapist and a coach. Many wives I've worked with, they're carrying so much because their husbands feel sidelined or unsure of their role. And sometimes when they try to step up, unfortunately, the wife will criticize and show disrespect and almost want to even also mother them, where they're acting like your mom. I did a video, you can watch it right here, about you're not my mom, because I find that sometimes husbands feel that way. And I hope this is not true of your marriage, but you can tell, as I have outlined, how feminism can be a damaging. And I hope you are going to reject that from that standpoint and embrace what we have talked about, the mind of Christ and what God intended for your marriage. Now, if this resonates with you, I've created a free 5-step roadmap, a proven steps that to help you build a more connected and fulfilling marriage, even if your husband isn't fully engaged right now. It's a simple tool designed to bring peace and purpose back into your relationship. And I want to make sure you get that. It's going to be, the link will be in the show notes below, the description below, but you can also have that at buildyourhappiermarriage.com roadmap, right? Now, you don't have to figure this out alone. That's the reason why I've created this 5 proven steps to a happier marriage and a stronger marriage, because I want you to kind of get, not repeat some of the same mistakes I made and other couples are making in their relationship. This guide includes the 5 steps and also how to understand your husband better. Understand that he may not be communicating what you think he is, and you're assuming certain things and making things up in your head. And possibly this narrative of feminism is leaking into your relationship. Now, feminism doesn't have to harm your marriage, right? When you strip away the extremes and rediscover the beauty of God's design for marriage, you find the peace, connection, and partnership you've been longing for. And that comes through what I outlined before. So I want you to make sure that you get this free guide, because I want us to work together to create the marriage you deserve. A marriage that honors God, strengthens your family, and bring joy to your heart. So again, you can get that free 5 proven steps to a happier, stronger marriage at buildyourhappiermarriage.com/roadmap. Okay. And the link will be in the description below. Now, I want to leave you with this scripture verse, which I think is very important. Psalm 127, verse 1. Unless the Lord builds a house, those who build it labor in vain. Remember, your marriage isn't just a relationship, it's a partnership with God. And you're only one communication skill away from a happier marriage. With that said, again, if you have not yet subscribed to the channel, please make sure you do that right now and smash that thumbs up button. And so I really appreciate that. And I want to encourage you to watch this other video right here, because it will help you to go a bit deeper into this idea of building happier, stronger marriage. God bless you both now and always. And I hope to see you, which I think you will, see you on the next video. God bless. Peace out.